Thanks, Albie, and thanks, everyone. So, as I alluded to a bit earlier today, one of the things that we're doing at Smart City Council now is getting busy making things happen. We've talked a lot about policy and a lot about strategy, but there's a lot of things that need to be done. And so what I'm going to be introducing today is the first of our task forces. It's a multi-consortia initiative, but first I'll briefly introduce our panel. George Reed from Siradel. Digital twins are the name of your game, George, and it's another thing along with artificial intelligence that's a very hot topic, and as we've heard before, there's probably about 20 different definitions of what a digital twin is and might do. David Sprinzen from Vantiq, a artificial intelligence firm out of San Francisco. David's firm's been very heavily involved in this task force and project that we've been working with, and I've got Kevin McCaffrey all the way from Galway in Ireland here. He's involved in digital transformation, and Kevin's the driving force behind our Smart City Activator tools and programs that I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Kostas Alexandridis or Dan Isaacs on the call for technical reasons, but they're our friends from Digital Twin Consortium, or Consortium, depending what country you live in and where you went to school. So I'll just keep mixing it up, and I'll say data and data as well, because it's just what I do. Oh, what's going on here? Sorry. So as I said, as an organisation, what we measure ourselves by impact, and that involves taking action and then enabling others we've talked about, to iterate, scale and replicate what we're doing. So the nature of this panel is I'll walk everyone here through as we go on a more interactive journey through this presentation to let you know where we've got to. We've been working for about a year on this project with Airports Council International. I've put this in here. This presentation is going to be available for people, but I just wanted to remind us all as an organisation why we are here, and we've talked a lot about safety today, and one of the really important aspects for us at Smart City Council that's here as well is creating beautiful places. It's something that people don't talk about a lot, but we touched on it with the Wellbeing Institute discussion this morning, and a really strong focus for elevating the human spirit and inspiring better outcomes and more productivity and enjoyment is the beautification of our spaces, and that's something we're really committed to, and we're really committed to having an equitable and diverse approach to everything we do. This is what we're getting onto in simple terms. If you make an impact, you become relevant. If you're relevant, you create value, and then that is a virtuous cycle that works from there. So the way our task forces will work online and in person will be very focused on high-value social areas and creating this virtuous cycle that's going to be self-fulfilling. So, onto this project. About a year ago, the telecommunications peak industry TM Forum started what they call a Catalyst project, which was about, as I alluded to earlier, something that people here would be very aware of, that every airport seems to be different. Airports are an incredible pain point for people. They're a critical aspect of human operation and human endeavour, and so Airports Council International came along to TM Forum and then ultimately Digital Twin Consortium and Smart City Council and said, can you help us, for our 2,000 members, identify how to make a standardised, data-driven, technology-enabled airport? This paper we presented to the IoT Solutions World Congress in Barcelona in the end of January, and now we have a task force that Smart City Council is leading with our colleagues to determine what that looks like and to build a set of tools to enable all of the, I think, 1,975 members to be able to operate in a standardised way. And one of the reasons industry groups like ours exist is that you can do things collectively, and you can share cost, you can share use cases, and you can accelerate change. And that's central to where we want to sit. So if I defer over to you now, George, one of the first tricky things to do a lot of the time is define A digital twin, and then B, what you can do with it. I think I've been in a lot of panels and in a lot of rooms where people sit around like Dungeons and Dragons experts and talk about how cool digital twins are, but there's not a lot of understanding about, real world examples. So from your perspective, when you approach a task like this, when 2,000 airports say, we want to develop a standardized framework, but we want an interoperable framework and we want an open vendor ecosystem, can you just maybe give us your sort of definition of what that digital twin positioning is, and then what the approach that you take is to looking to build an executable outcome?
Sure, thank you. So I'm going to digress 1 second and do a little comedy, keep everybody engaged. So, who knows the song War by Edwin Starr? War. What is it good for? So, everybody raise your hand?
Got it.
Okay. So, play along with me. Digital twins. What are they good for? Absolutely everything. So, ta-da. Thank you. Say it again. So, and I joke, but digital twins are awesome tools to have in your toolbox to do many different things. And what's a digital twin? Okay, I'll give you my definition and my company's definition. It's a 2D, 3D replica of a physical environment with all of the data sets, all the assets loaded on top of that map and georeferenced. It gives you a static view of the world today, or on the, I'll say whenever that data set is dated. So you have a map, you have a visualization of all these assets. What do you do with it? Well, you provide real-time interface capabilities. So now all my connected devices, my IoT sensors, can pump data into that digital twin. It makes it a living digital twin versus a static digital twin. And then another layer on top of that is being able to simulate future scenarios, future use cases. Solar potential on the rooftop of the airport, for example. What about green roofs on airports? How do I simulate that? What about pollution? What about how do I move people around? So you have the static as-built version. You have a real-time interface capability, so you can measure, monitor, control, act. And then you can also do simulations to look at future scenarios, future states, where you can make intelligent decisions about what are the next projects that I need to do to address my sustainability issues, my resilience issues, my transportation, mobility, traffic, pollution, you name it, you can do it.
Yeah. And you touched on a point just then, which was a bit of transformational thinking, I think, in this task force as it started, which is the movement from data in state to data or an event-driven approach, if I can keep mixing my datas and datas all the time. So that's been a really sort of transformational part, and I guess also a bit of a segue maybe into, David, where you're living in terms of taking that event-driven data. One of the other points that we identified in terms of the approach to this project was that clients and government in particular have spent a lot of time in the past trying to adapt themselves and bend around a piece of technology rather than the technology companies and service providers adapting to the actual needs of clients and citizens. And so this is a really important two-step process in starting to build out a value-based solution around airports, but you can imagine this methodology applies everywhere. So as we get just quickly to introduce the project as it got to now, initially our scope was limited to just passenger experience. It won't surprise people to know that airports, whether they're owned by government or private sector, want them to make money and they want them to be safe. And so, I've listed on the screen here are the sorts of things that you want. I mentioned earlier that large format retail environment, but if you can get people out of security queues and baggage queues and boarding queues and into restaurants and cafes and shops, then that's a good outcome for everybody. It's a really good example of that shared benefit analysis of the airport's winning by increasing revenue, but the passengers travelling also are having a much better experience in that asset. So there's a whole raft of value propositions in terms of as I've mentioned, even things like safety, fire safety modelling we talked to before, Scott, with a digital twin now, typically a fire engineer, safety engineer will make a hell of a lot of assumptions about how fast you can move people and where you need to move people. But if you can aggregate all of that data, you can model effectively an infinite number of scenarios around fire. And if you can imagine designing a new airport, suddenly you can reduce by half the number of fire stairwells, for example, or turn that space into shops or something more useful, or just build a smaller, more efficient airport. So as we move on from that case, I don't know if you want to pick up now and just talking about the aspects towards semantic modelling and the approach and involvement that you've had in building the proof of concept and how decision intelligence and artificial intelligence feeds in.
Sure. Yeah. I think David Sprinzen with Vantiq here. I want to quickly maybe take a step back and talk about airports in the broader context of sustainability. And we're here talking, the theme of today is sustainability, and there's sustainability across a lot of different perspectives, right? And I think the standard approach is sustainability being what is your carbon footprint. But there's also sustainability in terms of how efficient are your operations, how are you making decisions that can impact your bottom line, impact your employee performance, impact every element of your business, right? And that decision making comes to who's getting access to what data, how you're sharing data, how you're sharing stakeholder perspectives and what to do when. And the cool thing about airports is it's a fantastic testing ground of multi-domain integration and interoperability, right? Inside of an airport, you have passengers, you have security services, you have baggage tracking, you have flight information, you have retail, you have all of the amenities with which a passenger might engage with, everything from loyalty programs with their specific airlines. So all of those are different stakeholders in a very multi-dimensional data map. How do you take that big picture and understand how can we and all of the different people involved make the correct decisions and do things that are going to improve passenger experience, improve facility operations, create safer, and so you really need to think about it in the big picture. And that concept applies to smart cities in general, right? Multi-domain interoperability and integration and decision making. So what we did with this project is we worked with Airports Council International, ACI. They had developed this ACRIS model. I don't know if you want to just go quickly back. I'm just going to touch on this very quick. It's a semantic model of data interoperability. It applies to all of the things that are either static or dynamic data within an airport. And by making a standard data ontology, then they can create the source of truth in terms of what's happening, where it's happening, how you're collecting that data, how you're storing it, how you're representing it to all the different stakeholders. And so this was done with Airports Council International kind of backing the movement. But the cool thing about this is this ontology isn't really specific to airports. And what we're working now with Corey and Smart Cities Council is how can we create this kind of an approach across not just airports, but everything within a city, right? Transportation services, public health, public safety. So there's a bigger picture push here. I just kind of wanted to give that context.
And it's an important point you make because the model that we've got here, the next steps beyond airports are all transportation hubs, connections to cities, the experience of freight and logistics and what that all means. So, and again, I guess one of the other things to emphasise is as an organisation, if we're private sector, we want to go and build IP and then own that IP and monetise that IP. Our role as an organisation is to democratise this IP and to create knowledge, communities, capability, build capacity, and create better citizen outcomes. And the beauty of this approach is by enabling clients with tools and information to build more efficient airports, cities, rail ports, seaports, you name it, you're also creating a pretty vibrant marketplace for organisations to participate and help deliver those solutions that give environmental and citizen benefit. So I've got here one of your little models, but what we don't have playing through here is some audio. So I don't know if, can you speak to it?
I can speak to this. So this is kind of representing all of the different things IoT, that you might be collecting 5G. Data off of within an airport. And we created a digital twin This is kind of a V1 implementation, but this is taking real-time data from cameras and IoT sensors to model the location of passengers as they're flowing through the different elements of an airport, right? Everything from parking to check-in to through baggage claim, through security. And then, I think we lost it, but
real-time insights.
and then being able to use that to give visibility into not just airport operations, but then, for example, a big thing we're doing right now is being able to give passenger information to the relevant retail so that they're able to do things like, hey, we see that, this flight got delayed, there's a bunch of passengers laying around. Can we create a coupon or something to incentivize them to come sit and grab a coffee or grab a beer at our spot because we know their flight's delayed an hour, or maybe pre-check-in because the security lines are very long. How can we create engagement opportunities with passengers? So this is really representing that through a 3D digital twin in this case. Yeah.
And George, when you're approaching something like this, I mean, there's a foundational point where you've got to decide what sort of data sets that you want to gather and how you want to analyze them. Can you talk us through the sort of process that you take to that?
Sure. The starting point is, and it was said earlier today, you need to understand what your goals and aspirations are. So I think it was Ali, AWS, work backwards. So you start at the end point, and then you can drive backwards to say, what kind of information do I need to get to start with? What kind of KPIs am I going to measure? How am I going to do this? So you start with the end game in mind, and then you say, well, what data sets do I need? What kind of information? So if we're talking about passengers moving through an airport, do I have the access to those data sets, or how do I get the access to those data sets? Who gives it to me? Who can I share it with? So those kinds of questions are come up in any type of smart mobility hub or in city planning or county or airports, rail yards, those kinds of things. So you really have to understand where you want to go, and then what do I have in my possession that I can use to help formulate some strategies, project plans, and make some decisions. You can also run some simulations on that data. But you really have to find, it starts with data. And we mentioned that multiple times today. Data, data, data. And it has to be good data. It's not just, otherwise it's garbage in, garbage out kind of thing. So fundamentally, you need to understand what data sets I have in place, what data sets do I need. And you may have to work with other companies to help you understand what those data sets are that you need. And then if I don't have them, where can I get them? And then how do I use them and share them?
And to your point, and David, it will come to your discussion in a moment, it's making sure you've got valid, reliable, causal, importantly, and actionable data. I was speaking at a conference recently, and there's a lot of things you can do with statistics. You could say that you've got a 50% chance of dying because as many people are alive today as have ever lived and died, right? So getting inside the causality around that data, and also a topic that came up on a webinar this morning, and I'm minded of your panel discussion, Brian, is securing that data. When we first started storing data, we wanted to make sure it had integrity and it was secure, and then it was available. And with IoT devices now, we're kind of working the other way around. People are releasing devices every day designed around availability, but they're not necessarily very secure. And so the value of putting data in one place is that you can get these insights and take these actions that we're talking about, but the danger at the same time is that all of your data is in one place. So before Albie has a go at me, I know that we're running a bit for time, but I've got the next two panels so I can steal some time back later. I've got a few things here that we'll move through because I guess one of the next things that we talked about, we started out, 50 years ago with what I would call networked systems. And as we know like we've talked about with organisations that tend to be siloed, we tend to have systems also that have been siloed. You go into a facility management room in a building like this and you might see 20 PCs, one for vertical transportation, one for fire, one for air conditioning, one for cameras, lighting control systems, and on and on and on. To get the value and the outcomes that we've got here, it's moving from, let's say, networks, which were a whole bunch of systems that were on and off, then to intelligence, to to sort of actionable insights and intelligence now. So, you go from network to smart, where you've got a lot of data, but you're intelligent when you know what to do with that data, and you can actually build insights out of it. So that was another sort of fundamental aspect in terms of the approach. You mentioned, and there's a model here from our friends at Dassault. So one thing you can do with a digital twin now is iterate and performance optimize an asset, because you're getting data all of the time that's giving you information where people are, where bags are, and so on. The other thing that you can do if you look at mobility is start to model something like a vertiport and say, as eVTOLs take off, which are, electric drones, what does that do to an airport in 10 years' time? I was in Brisbane last Wednesday, and they've just signed an MOU for the Olympics that all the athletes and officials will be moving around by electric drones. So that's 2032, it's happening, and that materially changes the performance of an airport. And even going back to the need for capability and capacity in government, you can't just start flying electric drones around the place without needing the Civil Aviation Authority regulations and the Department of Transport and Roads regulations to come together. We had friends from Box here before. We're talking about the need for a risk framework around that. So you need to build an entire new piece of legislation or series of regulations, and then have somebody who can understand and own that risk. So there's a lot to the discussion. So as I said, there's sort of two streams of discussion here. One is we want to build and the tools for creating these standardised airports, and the other part of it is we want to make a difference. So in this task force, and our task forces now will be open around the world in the 6 regions that we're operating at the moment. There'll be domestic task forces around each topic, including digital twins in action and transportation hubs, with a global committee and a global, I call it a supervisory committee, but someone told me that's fascist and it needs to be called an oversight committee. So I think we've changed the name. But the process now, and Kevin, I want to come on to you, but the steps that we're taking now that we've built this proof of concept at Heathrow, and it's really important obviously to have the clients in the room as stakeholders, is to make the next journey in our project now from just passengers to passengers and logistics, to move from just airports into mobility hubs, road, rail, sea, adding in vertiports. The evolution then from a system to a system of systems model is really the difference between transport and mobility. One's focused on the delivery and one's focused on just moving people and things from different places. And that's, if you think about it in the terms of calculus, that's sort of second derivative in terms of what we're trying to deliver by iterating from a systems model to a system of systems model. And the last thing is to connect into the cities. I mean, I think we've sort of skirted around it today and identified it implicitly, but we're here about people and their places, as I said earlier, and all of these technologies are great, but they're not a solution to themselves, whether it's a great piece of cybersecurity software or whether it's a decision intelligence or an artificial intelligence tool. So what are we going to be doing? The first thing that we've done is build a framework for a white paper and a playbook that will be standardised. So any airport anywhere in the world can pick this up and start their journey very, very quickly. And it's a standardised journey, which again, will make things a lot easier for the private sector to participate in that journey, because there'll be templates around procurement, there'll be new procurement models in place that people can, instead of every single airport starting by ringing Deloitte and spending a year and $10 million to work out what they're going to do next. There's no one from Deloitte here, is there? I've got lots of friends at Deloitte, but they earn too much money. They can accelerate their movement forward. You can use one proof of concept instead of 2,000 proofs of concept that are all on different terms. One thing that's really clear client side is obviously you need a vibrant and an open and federated marketplace for people to participate, whether it's George's company or David's company or any of the other thousands of companies. For context, there's 19,000 airports in America. There's only 2,000 biggest ones that are a member of ACI, because I think the fees are pretty steep to join that organisation. But San Francisco Airport, the couple in Australia, my home city Adelaide, Brisbane, Auckland, are all members of this and are all deeply invested in wanting to get this playbook. The next bit's educational and training assets. We talked before about the capacity constraint at the moment that the public sector's facing. I know we'll hear from you in a minute, Leon, as well, over here, and people are, like refrigeration mechanics and air conditioning services, there's deficits of hundreds of thousands of people. Airports are facing an interesting time at the moment with people who have left the industry because of the lack of certainty that was around employment. And the reason that we're still only at 30% capacity is not because of all the planes that are parked in the desert, but people are just not coming back to the industry. So, you know, one of the big impediments, listening to Katie before, is things like industrial relations and change. I've seen many smart city projects that don't proceed because all the parking inspectors would lose their job, right? So what we want to be doing is identifying what jobs in 5 years' time we need that we don't have the capacity and skills around and the capability, what jobs we might not need anymore, and how can we retrain those people moving forward. And then the next bit is creating project tools, and Kevin, I'll defer to you as a digital transformation expert here and what you've been doing as part of this project. And I might just skip forward to an example of how this project has been built around the platform that you've created and what the key steps are to then materialising a project.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, the important thing about, I guess, digital transformation is now one of those buzzwords that everybody kind of uses for lots of different things. But essentially, if you think about fundamentally what's driving the change is technology and consumer behaviour and consumer wants, whether that be the citizen, whether it be a business, you know, they're looking at things differently. But and fundamentally on top of that, the services that are going to be provided to that end user or consumer are generally done through a collection of stakeholders, through a bundle offering or through an ecosystem, as people call it. So one of the important things when we were involved in this project was to make sure we understand what the problem statements were, what the value is you're going to bring from this. The biggest mistake that's made in digital transformation projects is people start with the how. They start with the technology, and that's the wrong place to go. You need to think about the people, you need to think about the business, you need to think about the customer, you need to think about, you know, the resources within your own organization. And if you get those other elements right, the how is the easy piece, the technology is the easy piece, because integration can be done, you know, it's been done all along. You know, in this project, we needed to have a method to collaborate and to visualize the ecosystem. So what you're looking at here is a visualization of the relationship between the key stakeholders in order to deliver what was termed a digital marketplace that would enable partners to onboard new services and to have the passengers being able to use those. So by being able to have that visualization, but it was collaborated by those participants, and you're getting that buy-in through that visualization very early. But to get to that point, you want to understand why we're doing it and the benefits that are going to be given. As I said, the biggest mistake is people starting with technology, and I'm sure many of you involved in cities are fed up of people coming wanting to put shiny things on top of poles without having any real idea what the problem is you're solving.
It's an interesting question. And before my life in this role, I was advising a city in Germany. I won't say their name, but they got 6 million euros of money to be a smart city, whatever that is. And they turned up to, I was working in advisory, and they turned up with a shopping list of stuff that they wanted to buy because they'd looked at all these cities around the world that they determined were smart. And if you buy these bins and these parking sensors and these cameras, that suddenly you'd be a smart city. And obviously, you can buy, with a knife, you can eat your dinner, you can kill someone, or you can save someone's life. You really got to your point, know what you're starting out trying to do, right? And too often, to your point, people buy lots of bright, shiny things. Yeah, and then there's an issue of civic trust as well, because people see their taxes being spent on things that make things more difficult.
And I think the other thing is, you look at the role of in the telecom industry of a mobile provider, and the fact that they're now involved in so many other industries as well. But in this particular project, one of the key challenges was around what they call the interoperability. So, you've got data that follows the standards in the telco world. You have something else in the airports. You can have something else, for example, in IoT. So being part of this project was also to look at that interoperability, so that if we're taking data using standard APIs from from a telco perspective, how does that feed into the airport system and dealing with legacy systems? So, you know, once you've kind of get to the how, you need to think about how it's going to work very efficiently, because you don't want, you know, it needs to be interoperable, and especially, and in many ways, an airport is like a small city. There's lots of legacy systems, there's lots of different players and stakeholders and regulations and all sorts of different things. So it's really a good stepping stone to move then into other projects from the cities.
And as you say, the template that we're producing here is going to be rich and useful for a whole lot of other applications beyond airports. Just want to know, would anyone rather hear an Irish person's accent or an Australian's? I think we have about the worst accent in the world. Someone called me Scottish the other day. That was horrible. I think that's
New Zealand.
terrible. So to bring this to a point, and then we've got some other colleagues who are going to join us on the panel because we want to step this out as an example to a broader world discussion. We welcome everyone to participate in these task forces. As I said, the end game is that you've got canvases that you'll be able to go into with a playbook and say, am I a government-owned airport, am I private sector, am I international, am I domestic, am I both? Am I a hub or a spoke airport? And very quickly define your project statement, to your point, Kevin, and accelerate the ability to start delivering these sort of values, and then to have a curated vendor ecosystem, a federated marketplace of participants. And one of the other beauties of that, and I say that as, you know, someone with a private sector background, I guess, is when you're spending, you know, tens and hundreds of millions of dollars on R&D, you really want to know that your product has a value proposition for a client, and the best way to do that is to be in the room having that discussion. And if your government, we talked about it before, government is often accused of moving slowly and being inefficient, but as taxpayers we want conservatism in the way that our taxes are spent. I mentioned earlier the discussion in Brisbane last week where there's $60 billion of risk priced in at the moment. So government is open and client side wanting to participate in creating better procurement strategies, in creating better design strategies, and to enable the best possible outcomes. Often projects won't happen with that much risk in them because the business case doesn't stack up at the end of the day as well. And so I mentioned earlier as well about wanting to move on from just machine learning to machine teaching. If we can create an ecosystem of 2,000 airports that can all safely and securely share knowledge. I mean, imagine if you were born and you already could speak every language that there ever was. You could understand all the complex physics that there is in the world, and you knew everything that ever happened in history. This is what we've got the ability to do with the internet, but most of the time people look at pictures of cats and dogs. So it comes back to what sort of data you've got and what you want to do with it. So what I'll do now is I'll thank our gentlemen here on the panel. Albie's gone, I've put him to sleep. Sorry, Brian.
Yeah, the ontology that we're talking about with the data, is there any overlap between the STF standard that Amazon reports?
Funny you mentioned that. So STF standard, as you mentioned, is with FIWARE. And so FIWARE is actually getting involved in this project. We've had a couple of meetings with them. They're more focused on kind of the standards around, you know, more general smart city capabilities. They don't have much that's specific to airports, so we actually kind of fill a void that they have. So we're evaluating exactly how that's going to happen, but right now, yeah, I think that there will be a standard of interoperability with FIWARE's context broker, which then makes this immediately extensible to all of the STF stuff that Amazon's doing.
Does that mean that like there's every data object has like the same set of metadata associated with it, and it's just filled in different ways depending on where it comes from?
Yeah, I mean, it depends. From the ACRIS model, it's really a schema ontology. So there's a standard, you know, of event format. You know, what's the object? Where is it located? How is it structured within this hierarchy of what's within an airport? FIWARE is more interested in having a one-size-fits-all API. And so they have really kind of tried to seamlessly integrate everything into one API. And so there's they're a little bit apples and oranges, but they work well together. Mm-hmm.
Ask away. We've got a question down here.
Great. I wasn't sure if we were allowed to. The question I have is, you said 2,000 big airports and 19,000 airports overall. So there's a lot of small airports that might not be destined to be huge transportation hubs.
Well, the beauty of the way we want to construct this playbook and the tools, like Kevin's tool that go around it, are that it's a choose your own adventure, almost airport building model. So, probably 5 of those small airports are just John Travolta's airports, I would have thought. How you go about constructing that airport, whether it's private jets, whether it's military or defence, really comes down to the complexity of the model, but we want to make a tool that whether you're a small regional, rural, endpoint airport or whether you're Denver, that you can create a valid, reliable, executable solution around that. It's another reason why you need a federated marketplace. You're not going to go and put SAP in if you're a tiny little airport, right? You've got to have vendors that are fit for purpose for the size and specific requirements. If you go to the Maldives, it's just all these tiny little seaplanes flying around with people who've left the military with substance abuse problems who've decided to go and live in the middle of the Indian Ocean. And that's not an exaggeration. But it's a very different proposition landing seaplanes on 80 inhabited islands in the Maldives as it is moving around somewhere like the States with 80 major airport hubs. So we need a tool that's got all that in it. It's why we want broad cross-sector participation in the project. There's a lot to do. There's a lot of people in the different industry groups. What we don't want to end up with is 15 different views of what good looks like, which is why a multi-consortia initiative, or consortia again, is really important. It's also why with what Brian was saying, we need cybersecurity people in the room, we need financial people in the room, we need lawyers in the room, we need accountants in the room, we need insurers in the room to have a discussion around all of this.
A key point I just want to make here is, so we talked about data interoperability, which is a key part of this, but part of that is not just around the data layer, but at the different services, the digital services that are supporting these. How do you create what we would call composability? And composability is taking all of the potential solutions and the validated technologies within that marketplace and make them so that they're all interoperable within that one shared digital framework. And so what that means, if you do that correctly, is you have extensibility. You can scale it to a small airport that's just doing one thing to a large airport that's doing everything, and it's all using that same shared digital architecture and backbone.
But if I can also add on that, the other element on that is around governance. So a lot of the data that we're talking about, there's the interoperability, there's governance there. But there's also around partners and vetting and trust and getting that collaboration in there and what you need to do there. And that's part of the playbook as well. So it's not a there's a technological aspect to it, and a data management, but also around the partner relationship. How are you going to onboard a partner? 85% of business ecosystems fail due to poor design, right? Not that they weren't a good idea, but they just aren't governed right. And that can be at the data level, or it can be just at a relationship level as well.
And what we don't want to end up with, and I use this example a lot with smart cities, is we go off and build an Airbus 380 and we've got no pilots and people drive it around like a car, right? And block up the streets. And there's a lot of challenges with that in terms of being able to get executable value over really powerful tools. Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your time up here.